So, question one, please share with us why you are the best candidate to represent the state of Louisiana in the United States Senate.
All right. So from my standpoint, I'm running as a libertarian candidate, and I think that we have two old parties that have offered us a lot of poor solutions. In fact, in a lot of cases, it's not solutions at all. It's essentially pandering and more of the same that's gotten us into a position that I view as untenable for our future. So I think that it's time to let the Libertarian Party, the third largest party in the United States, have a hand or a try at injecting some new life into our country.
Please summarize for us your top 3 priorities and how you can affect change in those areas.
Certainly. My first priority would be to help address what's going on in our nation right now. Probably the hottest issue is a lot of what we've been seeing in the wake of George Floyd's murder. Basically, what I think we need is some criminal justice reform. And there are 4 points that I view as the most important things that we need to do. The first one would be to end qualified immunity. The second one would be to decriminalize, starting with marijuana, but eventually all drugs, because I view that the drug war has led to a lot of the violence that we're seeing right now. Also, demilitarizing police and ending gun control as we know it will allow people to defend themselves. So criminal justice reform, that has 4 points to it. Healthcare would be my next one. I think that as a physician, I've observed that part of our problem is that there is no competition in healthcare. A lot of people are unaware what their healthcare costs because other people are paying for it. They don't know whether they're getting decent care. I think we need to expose what prices actually are and allow people to actually shop for the best care possible at a price point that they can appreciate. Also, if you know what one place is charging and another place is charging and it's good care as well, maybe you want to go somewhere that's cheaper or, for more higher efficiency, more bang for your buck, so to speak. And my third priority would be getting our economy back up and moving. I think we have far too much red tape at this point. We need to deregulate more of our economy and allow people to actually do business instead of, essentially limiting their capacity to do so.
Question 3, what are the biggest threats to our regional economy, and what role do you believe Congress has in helping us respond to those threats?
So I think the first thing is that we in Louisiana actually consume a lot of healthcare. And a lot of our population is amongst the sickest in the nation. So I think that reducing costs and allowing better access, as I previously mentioned, would help this region tremendously. I know personally I've observed a lot of people that have been hurting for a while, and basically with what the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, as some people call it, was supposed to do was to expand coverage, and essentially all it's done is it's given them an insurance that nobody takes in the form of Medicaid. And it's also displaced a lot of people from their own insurances. So I think we need to undo that damage, and that will help. I think that the COVID-19 pandemic has shut down a lot of our economy. We in Louisiana have a lot of people that are involved in the service industry. I think that those people have been hamstrung by the lockdowns. I think we need to loosen those restrictions considerably and let people get back to work, especially now that we're starting to see that all of our case numbers are going down and that our hospitals are taking care of people as they should be. Many people now that 4 or 5 months ago would go into the hospital and stay for a long time are not at this point because we know better how to treat individuals. So I think that basically reducing, letting people get back to work and doing what they need to do to make money for their families and themselves and stimulate our economy again will help. And I think that a final piece of this, as I've mentioned, criminal justice reform can improve all of those things, but one of the things that I think would help significantly, we've been talking a lot before COVID, obviously, because that sort of occupies much of what we discuss now. There was what we were talking about, the opiate epidemic. And I think that part of part of that has been stimulated by the drug war, overprescribing of narcotics, and that at least by starting to decriminalize marijuana, people will have another option for their pain control that actually is significantly less addictive than what we use in pill form or worse. So those would be the three main things I think I would try to help target to help this region in particular.
In your opinion, what are the key industries in the Shreveport-Bossier region today, and where do you believe we should be positioning ourselves for the future?
It's a good question. I think part of what we need to be doing, and one of the main things that I've also talked about already is that the service industry is a major thing throughout the entire state. So I think that we need to, again, let people get back to work, deregulate and remove a lot of the red tape that prohibits people from obtaining licenses. In fact, a lot of the licenses I feel are unnecessary, and basically allow people to get to the crux of doing business instead of wasting time going through the processes of acquiring business licenses or adhering to all kinds of restrictions that the government, institutes that I think are arbitrary. So the service industry, it's a main thing. I think that in addition, obviously the oil industry is a major thing throughout here, throughout the entire state. I'm not sure that I can target anything specific that I think that we aren't already doing for the oil industry other than reducing restrictions on business, as I've already discussed. And agriculture, obviously up there, I'm in Hammond, is a important piece of this puzzle. I think that also reducing arbitrary restrictions on agriculture across the board, and I think as a libertarian, I'm into small government, reducing restrictions throughout any industry is going to help. So I think one of the main things we need to do is actually look at what laws are necessary and what laws are really just prohibitory, and get rid of them.
What is your view of the current American healthcare landscape, and what congressional action do you believe is necessary to improve it?
So, as I've already mentioned several times, I think that healthcare is a major issue. I think what the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us is that healthcare is in significant shambles. I don't mean necessarily the care that doctors and nurses or respiratory therapists or physical therapists or any of the ancillary people that make a hospital run or make the health industry go are providing poor care. That's really not what the problem is. Problem is that we have come to be dependent upon third-party payers to pay for healthcare. And what that's largely done is made people irresponsible in their choice of healthcare. I think everybody expects Cadillac care, and I think that that's really not possible in a situation where we're pooling our resources together, like insurance, or Medicare or Medicaid, where basically all we're doing is lumping dollars together and paying as a group rather than individually. I think one of the things that was intended to help that was the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. And I think what it ultimately did was it just made the problem worse. I've been directly involved in healthcare for just over 10 years. That's including all of my training and my practice out as a physician. And I think that what I've observed over that 10 years is a significant decrease in actually accessibility and affordability of care. There's no reason that we shouldn't be aware what care costs. I think that promoting competition, allowing people to buy insurance across state lines or even in international lines, again, or in the first place would be a good thing. The Affordable Care Act was actually one of the other things that it did was restrict drug sales across international lines. What this did was it prevented us from being able to obtain drugs that are just the same as the ones manufactured in the United States for an affordable price. It's actually illegal now to go purchase drugs in Canada that are in some cases, a quarter the cost of what they are here in the United States arbitrarily. And so I think that by allowing competition again in healthcare, letting people know what healthcare can actually cost if we're paying for it ourselves, and going back to a real insurance model. Because if you really think about it, what does car insurance pay for? It pays for a disaster with your car. It doesn't pay for an oil change, doesn't pay for anything really that's general maintenance. It pays for if you get into a major accident or have some other major calamity that happens. If we go back to health insurance as what we call catastrophic coverage, where essentially it covers something that major that happens, something you weren't expecting, broken bone, cancer diagnosis, major accident, something like that, instead of paying for everything that we pay for, and let people pay for lab tests and drugs and those sorts of things at more affordable prices.
And question number 6. A number of our significant community assets, such as the Cyber Innovation Center, Barksdale Air Force Base, Red River, and I-49, I-20 depend upon federal support. How would you support these initiatives while in the Senate?
So as a libertarian, I'm generally less interested in having a bloated federal government. I think that a lot of things, although they can sometimes be beneficial, get funding that are taken from taxpayers from across the country and sent to places that those people potentially have never heard of. While this can seemingly be beneficial, I think that one thing that would help is if we essentially open up any of those initiatives that are possible to be funded or at least provided by private industry. In many cases, private industries can do things more efficiently than public interests can. And so I think that if there's something that we want here in Louisiana, it would be better left to our state to handle. And if we can find a bidder that'll do it more than a bloated government interest would do, find a private bidder that can do it for a cheaper cost or more efficient, a faster time frame, or control it by private grants and things like that, private charity, I think that would be better. So I would try to promote something that would happen more on a state level so that people have more control rather than by federal funding.
All right, question 7. Our area has an abundance of oil and gas resources. At the same time, renewable energy development is expanding across the globe. What role do you believe Congress and the Senate have in helping our region address both of these opportunities?
It's a great question. So I, as a libertarian, feel that a lot of things that we do with our basically blunt tool of government rather than fine instrument, I view it more as a baseball bat and a scalpel, often have unintended consequences. And I think that a lot of what we're doing right now is prohibiting innovation. I think that we need to get out of the way of private companies from exploring alternatives. One of the ones that I think would help significantly in the United States, we've seen it across the world, we can do nuclear energy safely and efficiently. It is the greenest form of legitimate energy that we have. I think if we deregulate and remove the prohibitions from being able to actually use nuclear reactors that we have proven, again, most of the rest of the world uses nuclear reactors in a very safe way. We in the United States know the safest way to build reactors. I come from my original home state of Delaware. There are 2 actually reactors that are visible from the shores of Delaware and New Jersey that provide much of the power for the mid-Atlantic. That includes New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia. It's always been safe and efficient. And I believe that we can do that across the country. That would be my first step, is to not deregulate, but remove any restrictions, because I think that there are safety measures, obviously, that we need to follow with nuclear energy. On the other hand, however, I think that we've restricted the ability to build a new reactor to the point that it's prohibitory. We haven't built a new reactor in this country in multiple decades at this point. I think that's a travesty. We need to be using our best resource first. I also support anything that's going to allow oil and gas companies to obtain more oil and gas. I think that we can use carbon in a safe way. And at the same time, I think that anything that's going to remove inhibitions from companies or stimulate companies to pursue other green energies like solar, which really is not efficient enough at this point to substitute for any of our fossil fuels. I believe that that can help supplement, not replace what we're already doing. So again, I'm for removing any restrictions that are going to prohibit any company from finding alternatives or using what we already have that we know works well.
Congress has recently passed nearly $5 trillion in stimulus relief to support businesses and individuals during the pandemic. How do you believe Congress should approach addressing these costs over the long term?
That's also a great question. So I think that as a libertarian, again, I think we have a significant tax and spend problem here in the United States. We have run deficits for multiple decades again, and we have clocked up a debt that we have perpetually had to raise the debt ceiling on. This is unsustainable in the long run. We also have multiple social programs that are running out of money very rapidly. And we need to get a handle on this very quickly. I think it would have been a lot nicer if we had not had to give people their own money back in the form of stimuluses. If we had a flat tax, I think that would be the first thing I would try to do, a flat tax of say 15% with perhaps a low poverty line exemption to that tax. I think that would actually do a lot to simplify and shore up our revenue stream as far as federal revenue is concerned. Then we need to take a hard look at what we're doing, pass a balanced budget amendment, and require that Congress always spend within its means. They expect that of all of us. We should expect that of Congress and our federal government. I think those two things would immediately show us that we have a lot more solvency in our country than we realize. But I think that then we need to set our sights on cutting down government. If we allow people to do business unfettered, keep more of their own money, utilize private industry and private charity more, we'll find that we don't really need the size of the government that we have. And I think that we would see that our economy would flourish if we allow everybody to just live their lives and do business as they see fit.
Question 9. It appears that partisanship is growing more deeply entrenched in Washington, D.C., and citizens are growing more frustrated with the political process. What will you do to help change that and still remain effective for the state of Louisiana?
So obviously, as a libertarian, I'm not part of the red team or the blue team or Republican or Democrat, however you want to call it. Incidentally, the color for the libertarian is gold. Green Party obviously is green. I think that being apart from the R versus D political game as a libertarian would do a lot for me to be able to stand there and really pick out the best parts of what both sides have. A lot of times you hear when a person asks, so what is a libertarian? The easiest answer that we give is that we are fiscal conservatives and that we are social liberals, meaning that we really just want government to leave you alone and let you live your life, as long as you're not hurting anybody else. And I don't think that that's a difficult philosophy for much of the country, much of Louisiana to get behind. In fact, I think that unfortunately, Republicans and Democrats are really catering to the marginal fringe extremes of either side of their ideology, and they're really losing the middle of our country. I think that libertarian ideals, while we have some extreme thoughts and philosophies, we also have some very practical ideas when it comes to get back to the middle and compromising and finding a sustainable road forward. So I think that being able to be what I think of as the voice of reason between these two really insane voices on either side, I think that that would give me an advantage, although it would leave me without, obviously it would leave me in a minority. But I think being in the minority would garner me a lot of opportunity to sort of hold both sides accountable for what they're really doing. And I think that they're having their way with the United States, and they have for far too long, and that they really need somebody who's actually going to be there fighting to keep them on the path in a reasonable way.
And for your 10th question, the year 2020 has been a challenging one for our nation with unprecedented levels of healthcare risk, economic disruption, and social unrest. What is your perspective on these issues, and what role do you believe Congress should play in addressing them?
So I think I've pretty much actually already answered this question at the beginning of all of this. So once again, I think that what we've observed, and I'll sort of put this in a narrative context since I've already answered each of those pieces before. I think that what we saw was we suffered a global pandemic. We had a lot of missteps, I'll call them, on behalf of the federal government. I think that actually Governor Edwards, at the beginning of this, personally, I thought he was doing a reasonable job. I think, however, that what we did not do and what the federal government didn't do was be honest with the American people. This was a new virus. We as doctors did not know how it was going to affect the population. We had some bad information from China. They did what they always do as a totalitarian regime. They kept what they knew a secret. I think they could have helped us by giving us that information. And I think that if we as physicians had been honest, and the CDC and the federal government had been honest about masks and all of the social distancing up front, instead of playing the games where we come out and say masks don't work, and then they do work, we should have been consistent and said they absolutely do work, but right now we really need them at the front lines of healthcare. Please help our healthcare people. Do not take out our frontline soldiers by letting them get exposed and get sick. Please leave it to them. Once we get a handle on this, we'll be able to let you get to the mass as well, and we can do what we need to do. In the meantime, stay home. If we had just been that honest from the front, I think it would have gone better. Then we wouldn't have had to have the lockdowns for as long as we did. In fact, I think the lockdowns might have been a mistake. I'm not going to get into that argument, but I do think that the length, at least, of the lockdowns have been a problem. Obviously, we've seen a lot of economic devastation, which was a direct result of the pandemic and the lockdowns. In addition, we had an over-leveraged economy that was largely as a result of the tax and spend model that I've been speaking about before. And then we had an event, really the entire country was behind the people involved. And we witnessed a very extreme act of violence executed upon a citizen who didn't necessarily deserve to be executed in the streets. He might have been a criminal, but he didn't deserve death. So you get people locked up, you get people away from their family and their friends, and obviously violence is going to ensue. So I think that we need to, as I've said, get people back to work, address the real issues at the heart of this with criminal justice reform, and really allow people to take control of their healthcare again. And I think that that will show us that we actually can recover from all of this in a reasonable fashion.
Okay, and this will be your final question and will include your final remarks. Is there anything else you would like to tell us about yourself that we have not covered?
So I think at this point in time, based on a lot of the questions that we've answered, we've hit a lot of my major campaign points. Other things people may not know, I am a board certified neurosurgeon. I have a subspecialty in what's called skull base tumor resection. The skull base is essentially everything beneath your brain, behind your face, is the way that I like to say it. It requires a very intricate work. I think that my experience within surgery and some personal experience with medical politics it gives me an interesting perspective. One of the campaign slogans I have on my website is that I'm a libertarian neurosurgeon who would like to remove the cancerous parts of our government. I think that we do too much in our federal government, and I think that Congress has largely abdicated its responsibility to the presidency. We are a constitutional republic that has democratically elected leaders. We need to get the power back in the hands of our legislators. Whether they want to take it back or not, they need to take control of it. And I think that giving the power back to the people, holding our legislators accountable for their actual actions or inaction, as we've observed over the last several months, is the best path forward. I think that the Libertarian Party and me personally as a Libertarian candidate can help to do that. I think that people are interested in change, real change, which means that people have to actually get to work, make some tough decisions, get a little raked over the coals for their decisions, and actually do what the American public expects our leaders to do, and that is lead. I think that I have a proven track record within surgery of being able to lead a surgical team and perform successful surgeries, very complex surgeries. And let's just face it, politics isn't brain surgery, but clearly I've got that covered too.